Well, we've got another great name that's ready to join us here. That's probably got his own thoughts on the name test. We've got Dylan Hornik, who is an MLB content creator with BetMGM out of Brooklyn. Welcome into PHLY Phillies. Dylan, nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be here.
Well, I have to ask, because Jamie is very big on this. Are you big on the name test for baseball players, like especially with prospects?
100%. Absolutely. I think like 75 to 80% of your worth as a major leaguer is your name. It's got to sound good. Jamie's got the announcing voice perfect. It's all about the look and the feel. If you look good and your name sounds good, that's like 75% of the battle.
We're almost there. So we're doing our Down on the Farm reports, Dylan, where we're like previewing the top 25 Phillies prospects here during the down months. And the first thing I always say is, does he sound like a big league player? And today's was Christian McGowan. I'll ask you, right? Doesn't really sound like a ball player.
You know, I don't want to disrespect the kid. I'm sure he's a hard worker, but the name's just not inspiring. You need something, a little, especially I know like he throws hard. He's probably pumping high 90s. You need something that's a little stronger. It's got a little more gusto to it.
Exactly. Dylan gets it, Renee.
All right, Dylan. Well, you come in, you're siding with Jamie already. That's one negative point for you. But listen, overall, this has been quite an offseason. I know for you as a content creator, much like for us as we're hosting our shows, sometimes you find yourself like, okay, we're all just waiting. We're all just waiting for what's next. What has it been like for you with content creation and trying to keep things spicy and creative with the baseball offseason of things to put out? Like, there's been stretches, Shohei Ohtani, Yamamoto, for example, where it's like, it's easy. Our jobs are easy. Then there's been other stretches where it's like, we have to sit and talk about whatever, finding things to talk about, finding things to post about. How has this offseason been for you with your content creation?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really like, I think the first, month and a half, 2 months of a free agency and trade season, hot stove season, it was awesome. You had the Juan Soto trade happen, relatively quickly. Shohei Ohtani rumors just swirled for, a month and a half or 2 months, the Yamamoto stuff. And then by Christmas, it was kind of, all right, all the big stuff's done. We got to wait for, Blake Snell still on the market, Jordan Montgomery still on the market. The Teoscar Hernandez thing was, big-ish, depending on your view. So it's kind of like, by Christmas and the new year, you're just kind of, at this point, like, I'm over hot stove season, all the content creation, making memes, making jokes, making hot takes. It's great. I want to get to real baseball at this point. I want pitchers and catchers. I want people on mounds and people in batting cages. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, Dylan, 19 days until pitchers and catchers. I'm right there with you. Yeah, so one of the things we were talking about today is Phillies are kind of in a weird spot with remaining free agents because they might not have a lot of at-bats or innings to offer to some of these guys that might want, kind of a guaranteed amount of playing time. So we kind of transferred our thoughts to the trade market. And Emmanuel Clase, the closer for the Guardians, excuse me, I almost went to their previous name, it could be available. This dates back all the way to last June, July. Because he's so young and so cheap and team-friendly contract, he's going to cost a lot. Is he a type of guy to you that is worth giving up maybe 2 of your top 7 prospects for because he's only 26 years old?
Yeah, I think that's, the great calculus of this time of year. And if you're the Phillies, you got to look at where you are in the National League, right? And where you are as a team. Back-to-back NLCS appearances, you're at a game away from making a World Series again. And the very obvious, I think, glaring hole in the team in the playoffs was back end of the bullpen, right? Craig Kimbrell was not great. You're trusting Jeff Hoffman to throw late, high leverage situation innings. And, with the Dodgers being the Dodgers and the Braves being the Braves, I think the Phillies, if they make that one big upgrade back into the bullpen, make it elite, I think they can jump into that conversation, be right there in the World Series conversation contention again this year. So to me, this is your window if you're the Phillies, right? You have all the pieces. Bryce Harper's there. JT Realmuto's there. You have, Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber. Your lineup's great. Your rotation's great. Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola coming back. You make this move, you put yourself in the upper tier of teams in the National League and in baseball as a whole.
Yeah, and as you just talk about the plans for the Phillies, you're spot on. Something that we've mentioned a lot of is it's a win now team. They've got the pieces there. They've got the talent there. They didn't need to do much this offseason, but just around the edges, as Dave Dombrowski's talked about. But you mentioned a name in Kyle Schwarber, and I'm interested in your thoughts because, sometimes I feel like when you're working so closely to a team and you're covering them, you can find yourself a little bit more biased. And the league's been putting out rankings for positions, and they had the fan rankings, which had Kyle Schwarber, I think he was number 3 as a top 10 left fielder, and they had him at number 10 for top 10 left fielders as the league actually put together, with Yordan Alvarez at the top and a lot of other great names in between. Are we missing something on Kyle Schwarber as a left fielder? What are your thoughts on Kyle Schwarber's ability as a left fielder, and if he's a top 10 left fielder in Major League Baseball as of now, even as someone that was a DH for the Phillies for the majority of the season?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, right? I mean, I love Kyle Schwarber. I think he's a really fun player to watch, hits big, long home runs, 40, 50 bombs a year. Doesn't, hit for a high average, but that's okay in today's game. I think what the league and the fan voting or the fan poll really missed is that he's not a left fielder, right? Johan Rojas comes up towards the end of the year. He goes to center. Brandon Marsh goes to left. Schwarber's DHing. You're putting a DH as the 10th best left fielder in the game. And I know the position is weak right now, but you got to find somebody else that's actually playing the position to occupy these 10 spots, right? I mean, if Kyle Schwarber is the opening day left fielder for the Phillies, I think that there's probably something that went wrong in spring training. He's going to be the DH. He should be the DH. If somebody hands him a glove in March, I don't think that bodes well for the rest of the season, to be honest. So, he's a great player. He's a great power hitter. He's just not a left fielder.
He was terrible. I'm very
I
much
was trying to be nice. He's not.
No.
Left fielder.
Between him and Rhys Hoskins, it was the worst left field play I've ever seen in my life. So I'm very much looking forward to good defense in left field. Dylan, I know you do some work with BetMGM. One of the things our own producer, Tyler Zulli, has been putting out some superlatives about maybe some fun bets out there. I love the season-long bets, the MVPs, the Cy Youngs, Rookie of the Years, the batting titles, all that stuff. In your off-season work here, have you come across any season-long bets that you think are really good, kind of long shot odds, and what might those be?
Yeah, I'm not sure about long shots, but one of the really, really fun betting markets that I've come across this offseason is right after Shohei Ohtani signed with the Dodgers. I think a bunch of sports books around the country put up his home run prop. I think there's some places you can get it at over under 37.5 homers this year. Some places it was 39.5. Some places it was 40.5. I think something like that for a player like that who he's not going to pitch this year. He's going to DH. He's going to be in the middle of a incredibly potent lineup with Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, etc. I think something like that to track all year. And, you're kind of living and dying with every Shohei Ohtani homer. He's the best player in the game. He's the most exciting guy that you're going to watch on a nightly basis. You always want to root for the over in a situation like that. So, taking over 37.5 or 39.5 or 40.5, whatever the line may be, that's one that I really, really am interested to follow throughout this season. It's just, it's one of those fun little, not a crazy bet, not a crazy amount of money needs to be put on it. It's just something fun to follow, especially if you're not a fan of the Dodgers. Keeps you interested.
Are there any sleeper bets that maybe you have that people may be missing? I do feel like people get caught up easily in the flash you names or, what even could be obvious. And as James even mentioned, the easy ones. But is there anything that you feel like, okay, that's one that might now not make sense to others, but has a potential chance of really hitting?
Yeah, I always look at, for something like that, I always look at team wins over unders. I think last year, the big one we saw was the Reds going way, way over their team total for wins that was set at the start of the year. So you look for a team like that, someone that's young, hasn't really proven themselves yet. It could be the Reds again this year. I think I'm looking at them a lot. They have another year, that young core in the lineup of experience. They have an okay bullpen. Like you guys said earlier, I think they're probably looking at Emmanuel Clase as a trade target for the back of that bullpen. They have some good young pitching. I think, I think the Reds took a step forward last year. And if you look at their team total, their team win total, I don't know what it's set at exactly, but I would not be surprised in that division if they kind of shot over it again and maybe took the division, went over their team win total overtook the Cubs and the Cubs and the Brewers as the team to beat in the NL Central, especially Brewers probably setting up for a down year. The Cubs kind of never hit where they were supposed to be last year and didn't significantly improve on that team this year. So I'm really, really excited for the Reds this year. I think long shot, if you can call them a long shot, I don't know. I think they're still on the cusp of being that young upstart team that's going to kind of take the NL by storm a little bit.
So some books have the Phillies, Dylan, as 90.5, which I think is a really good number for this team, because I think if everything goes well, I think I can very much see them being a 94, 95 win team. If things don't go well, they could be that 85, 86 win team again. So I think that number's great. What would your gut say for a play on the Phillies season long? Is that an over to you, or does that smell like a possible under?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty easy over this season. I know the Phillies have gotten out to slow starts the last couple of seasons, really turned it on in the second half. But if you look at where the NL East is, right, you have the Braves. They are the top of the division. The Mets kind of taking a step back, kind of retooling under David Stearns and kind of doing what the Phillies did and improving on the edges, but they kind of need more than improving on the edges. The Marlins are going to be okay, but I still think that they need 3, maybe 4 big pieces to really be in playoff contention. And the Nationals are the Nationals. So the division as a whole has kind of taken a bit of a step back. And the Phillies have taken a step forward, and they can obviously take another step forward if they make that big acquisition like Emmanuel Clase or something like that. I think 90.5 is a very good number, like you said. I really like the over here. I think the Phillies, if everything goes right, they can compete for the division, to be totally honest. And I don't really see a bottom out situation. I think their floor is probably 87, 88 wins. So the 90.5 to me feels like an easy over.
Well, my last question for you, Dylan, is with all that we've seen, we talked a lot about the teams that have been active and have been doing a lot this offseason. What are the teams that jump out to you that haven't done enough but needed to do more so far this offseason?
Yeah, I already mentioned one of the Mets. I think they really needed to make a big splash. I think they kind of bungled the Yamamoto signing, letting the Dodgers match that contract that they offered him. I really think they needed something at the top of that rotation, and probably needed more in the back end of that rotation to help Edwin Diaz. In addition to, they probably don't have a great lineup outside of the top 4 or 5 hitters. They're probably the biggest one, only because they come with such fanfare the last couple of years with the Steve Cohen taking control of the team and winning 101 games a couple of years ago. They just have they had this aura about them where they were going to take control of the National League and be the team to beat for the next 4 or 5 years, and they just haven't done that. And they didn't do enough this year to really convince me that they're going to be anything more than a fringe wild card team. I think if you look at the American League, you're really, really like the Red Sox. I think, I'm trying to put this the right way, they are an okay team with the expectation that they're always going to be a great team, right? A bunch of titles this century. Craig Bresler comes in. He says they're going to go full throttle, make the big acquisitions, make the big signings, and it didn't happen. And they're I think Nick Pivetta is going to be like their number 2 starter, their ace or something. It's not very inspiring for a team that expects, and a city that expects, contention every single year.
Yeah, last one for you, Dylan. Let's play the big 2 landing spots here. Cody Bellinger, obviously the top offensive free agent on the market. Blake Snell, top pitching arm on the market. What's your best guess as to where each of those guys end up?
It's a tough one. Blake Snell, I'd really love to see go to Seattle. I think the Mariners really need another pitcher if they want to compete in the AL West and in the wild card scenario. I think he's a West Coast guy. He's stated his preference to be in Seattle, to be a Mariner. Whether they shell out the money, I'm not convinced. But also, you have to consider, as we get later in the offseason, his number is going to come down. And I think that if they can kind of finagle with Scott Boras a little bit and get, if it's a 2-year deal with some options or a 1-year deal with a bunch of options, I think that they can nail down Blake Snell. Would love to see him go there. Cody Bellinger is like one of the most interesting free agent cases of the last decade. He was great, obviously, in Los Angeles for the first few years of his career, had a really, really bad 2 or 3 year stretch, and kind of revitalized himself with the Cubs last year, 330-ish homers, I believe. So when you look at a team that needs that, I think going back to the Cubs, like I said before, they really haven't made that gigantic acquisition this offseason. Would love to see them go back there, kind of anchor that lineup if they're going to compete in the NL Central. But again, I think this is such a unique offseason because these guys are still on the market. As things get later and as we get closer to pitchers and catchers reporting and spring training starting, I think really it could be open season on these guys for any team. I think Scott Boras represents a lot of these guys that are still out there and is willing to, do a 1-year deal for a lot of high AAV, for a lot of money for 1 year to kind of get these guys going and then try again next season. So I would not be surprised to see some sort of crazy, like, even the Phillies could take a 1-year flyer on Cody Bellinger to kind of, juice up that lineup, or Blake Snell just, for the fun of it. I think we're in a unique situation in free agency this year where as like in late January, early February, everyone's in on every free agent, kind of everything's on the table.